I have a question for you. Are you comfortable talking about the book that you're working on?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It
Okay.
doesn't come out until the fall, October. And so, yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that.
All right. Well, tell us about rediscovering Christmas, and particularly my first question about it is why Christmas and why now? Mm,
I know it's stumped me too. So, my first book was on the Enneagram and helping people understand that from a spiritual formation standpoint. My second book was on contemplative prayer and what that does in our neurology and how we can think about being still and slowing down in a culture of hurry and anxiety. And so, like when my publisher, I write for Penguin, and when my publisher was like, "Wait, you want to write on Christmas now? Like, what's the common thread here? Like, I don't understand. Help, like, hold my hand." And it was like, well, I'm so interested in like original historic context, and I think that has a lot to do with life today. Like, for example, like if you look at the innkeeper, there's no innkeeper in the Gospels.
right.
We've written him into our pageants, our church plays. That word is used for the Good Samaritan innkeeper. That's not the same word used when Joseph and Mary can't find space. It's most likely a family member, and they're at a house, and the guest room was already taken because most likely the census family had already come in town. And so that whole chapter is on hospitality. That what does it mean? They actually were given a space in the home by the trough, which was where the animals would come into the home and be in the foyer of it, if you will, to give warmth to the home. So they actually were given space. They weren't kicked to the curb, and that's often the story: is no vacancy, get out of here.
They weren't in
And
a
so,
cave. They weren't in a cave that they called a
well,
manger.
now it might have been a cave next to the home. That's also part of first century
Okay.
dwellings.
Okay.
I
Okay.
kind of take
Okay.
there's a couple historical points you can take. They both are communicating the same thing: is that
Yeah.
hospitality was given, and that Jesus was born into like utter poverty. It's fascinating to us that we just imagine him even in our art as some sort of like middle upper class, whatever.
Right.
Um, but like so I got really interested in saying, okay, I think the first century has a lot to do with our life today. Like there is something like we need to reclaim hospitality. Hospitality for me was the evangelism agenda of the first century church. How do we become hospitable? And that is what made the church so compelling was their capacity to love. Um, and so things like that got me really interested of what if I helped people take these like 12 to 13 characters of Christmas, dig a little bit underneath to say it's probably a little bit different than you think. Let me surprise you a little bit because I know you probably think you know everything about Christmas because you've been to the pageant, you've been to the church service, you've done the thing. Maybe there's more that we can sort of scratch off the surface here and get underneath all this stuff and then connect that to our everyday life. I find that was something that really inspired me to do, particularly with all my trips to the Holy Land. Like I'm interested in that culture, and so that was sort of natural for me, and thankfully Penguin went for it.
That's awesome. What do you think it is that Christmas does for us individually?
It exhausts us individually for the most. I mean, that's the felt experience of most people.
Yeah.
We're grateful to see family. We're exhausted to see family. We're grateful to eat food. We're tired of fruitcake. These sorts of like cliches of the Christmas holiday, lawn inflatables. That becomes like the driving thing that needs to happen on a Saturday. Get the kids out of bed and let's put up the lawn inflatables.
It's
Um,
Christmas, Audrey. Everybody's miserable.
so I think people oddly, whether it's subconscious or not, I think there is a simplicity, a quietness, a kind of hush, a kind of in the dark longing for just a small light to come. And that's exactly what happens to the shepherds when they're out on these fields. And that there's this light that tells them good news. And that it's not that there's a discount or an Amazon sale. It's that like God is coming into your midst in a way that the ancients before you had never experienced and yet they longed for. So for us to join them in that, I think is really good news. But instead we get just sort of like caught up in the clutter. And I get it. There's so many parties, and there's just so many things that are just put on us at the holiday that I think people long for just a simplicity. And so that's what I hope that this book kind of delivers is a kind of in the quiet of the night, just reflect on a few things that are true.
Cool.
Yeah.
Give us can you give us some kind of practical images of what that would look like in the normal? You think about a person's normal experience going through the holiday season
Mm.
with the things that you mentioned, the consumer goods, the sentimentality, the hurried pace. Um, if someone were to read this book and apply it to their celebration of this of Christmas, what would it look like?
I think giving yourself permission to say no far more than you say yes this season. You know, we live by shoulds, and we end up sort of, these small little yeses add up to like a gigantic weight over the month. And that, by the beginning of the year, you're just like, oh my goodness, I'm exhausted. So
Yeah.
that practically is like the big takeaway, is like, are you comfortable learning to say no, disappointing a few people, maybe living a little bit more simply? I get rid of alcohol during Advent and Lent. And what I do is I'm a big fan of like bold red wines, and I'll buy a really nice bold red around Thanksgiving, and it'll just taunt me for a month sitting on my bev cart.
I
And
didn't know you were an ascetic, AJ.
I'm telling you, I contemplative tradition. I've got a little bit of that in me. Um, and I really just fast because of, dietary. I just want to maintain a weight. That's what it's really about. It's really about aesthetics. And I'm kidding. Um, but
About
it's
image.
something of saying no to even like all the different functions of waiting for something better. Um, and that, to come home after Christmas Eve, where we celebrate the coming of Christ that evening, and to open up a really nice bottle of wine that's been just like taunting me for a month, and remembering and celebrating that, God is with us and we're not alone. And things like that. It's the little things where you can begin to connect with a deeper heart. It's, if you're going to say yes to things, like say yes to things like hospitality and opening your life up to people, rather than just like attending functions and consumer debt and all the things that just kind of, add up over the course of the month.
I love it. Have you ever read the book The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry?
Yeah, so John Mark's a good friend of mine.
Oh, cool.
And of course, yeah, John Mark is that book was really very helpful for a lot of people. And so I celebrate the simplicity in which he's able to write and communicate in everyday language.
Yeah.
Um, I'm really appreciative to him and his friendship.
My I have a younger brother who's a pastor, and he recommended that book to me, and I read it last year, and a lot of the things you were talking about in this book were it reminded me of some of the things, but slowing down a little bit, you know, Sabbathing in a way, getting into a natural, like there's a spiritual rhythm, there's a natural physical rhythm of life your body is supposed to like follow. And I have a question for you, and I asked this to my brother because you're a pastor and a priest, and that you know that's like every single day some weeks. But how do you typically Sabbath? Is there a particular day you typically find yourself, you know, withdrawing on for rest? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, for me, because Sunday's a work day, Friday, Saturday are days for me. And on those days, like for me, the way I structure Sabbath is around enjoyment and like relationships. So like I say no to things on my Sabbath to say yes to greater things. And that's to reclaim that like I'm a human being.
Yeah.
And so like I cook a lot. On the Jews don't, they try to get everything done before sundown. But what I have found is like I love to, but cooking brings me life, and it's what I'm not doing the rest of the week. And so it's like a creative edge for me, and then I can share it with my family. So like it's not uncommon for me on a Sabbath morning to like get into a recipe that I'm just wanting to cook from scratch, go to the store, come home, and I'm alone and I'm just in my element, just doing my thing, listening to music and cooking. So, I think for Sabbath specifically, people have a kind of sort of confusion or dread about it or a religion about it. And it's like, whoa, 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 like reclaim like what brings you alive. Because as it turns out, I think God wants us to be alive. I really do. I think we have a God that wants us to laugh
I know exactly what you mean.
and
Yeah.
have fun. Like, so I had this question asked to me last year, and it just completely I didn't have a good answer. they said, "What do you do for fun?" And I was like, crap, I don't know. That can't be a good answer, right?
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah.
so I went on
Yeah.
this quest of like, what do I find fun? Like, where do I find myself getting lost and I'm not even counting hours? It's that flow that you
Mhm.
just find yourself in and you lose track of time. On Sabbath, we should be like creating moments where we can lose track of time.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's about. And that's
Yeah.
like the Sabbath was about stepping into eternity before it began. And it's like there's no time in eternity. So it's like, how do I step into like non-time where I lose track of all of that? And so that for me is, those are questions I'm asking now on my Sabbath.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this conversation, you like this interview, and you want to hear some more of it, including some down and dirty stuff we're not allowed to say here on YouTube, head on over to patreon.com/the Gosslings, sign up for one of our tiers, and enjoy some exclusive content.
That's right. And remember, keep it cool. And these are interviews
That strike down the darkness.
That's right, baby. A vertical punch.